You know, this is an era of spectacular progress, particularly in bringing the good things of life to more and more people.
And from their talks was forged a map for the path to freedom, a compact for the future, for the future, for the future. A map for the path to freedom.
And I will, before I kind of dive into some of the specifics, I'll preface by saying, maybe some of you haven't experienced the depth. Like, a lot of my story is panic attacks, social anxiety, fear, to the point where it's so extreme that it's like crippling and that you have to work really hard just to be a normal human being. So maybe you're maybe your experience isn't that intense in the area of fear and anxiety or emotional health, but if it is, perfect. This is going to totally change your life. You're in the right spot at the right time. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. And one of the things that's going to happen too is you're not going to be a victim to yourself anymore. We're going to get rid of that whole thing. It doesn't need to be happening. You don't need to be a victim to yourself. Feeling out of control of emotions, feeling like they scare you. I felt that for a long, long time. And we're just gonna deal with that. But where was I? Everyone is gonna get something out of today that is either it's gonna apply to you specifically. So I'm gonna talk. It's gonna be my story, but there's gonna be tools and keys that I give along the way because I really want today to be practical. And the reason why fear and anxiety is a thing is because we are learning how to be the steward of our own hearts. We're learning Proverbs 4:23, that above all else to guard your heart, for from it flows the wellspring of life. We're learning this understanding of how do we interact with these incredibly powerful, potent things called emotions, and how do we navigate through really hard moments and times, and how do we position ourselves proactively against or for, and that just can become a mess. It can just become confusing. So I'm going to pull it all apart, explain it to you guys, give you guys some practical keys, but everyone's going to get something out of this word. It's a bit of a different word, and I want to explain the mechanics of this thing are really detailed and slightly with internal stuff, emotional stuff, motivation stuff. If you're even off just a few degrees in your motivation, it can change. If I'm off, let's say, bam, this is where I'm going right toward the camera, right toward the back of the room, and I'm off a few degrees this way, 3 degrees. I'm it's not much, and it's not much to notice back here, but down there it's 5 feet. So down the road, this stuff blows up. But in the moment, it can feel, and even to explain is kind of a challenge. So I want you guys to bear with me and ask if something isn't making sense. So let's just dive in. I want to tell you a little bit of my story. Is that cool? You guys with me? Okay. Cha. I love that surf lingo. I love surfing. Oh my goodness. It's been one of the blessings of being in California. So, some of my story, specifically with in developing emotional maturity, working through fear and anxiety, I want to paint a really detailed picture for you, and it's going to be kind of negative, but it's for the purpose of proving to you that there's no such thing as a hopeless situation. That it doesn't matter how you feel or what your past experience has been or how many years it's been, God can still pull you out of that. He can still pull your loved one out of that. And I was in a place where I literally thought I was going to be like this for the rest of my life. Where if you're in something for an extended period of time, 4 years, 5 years, you know how easy for that is to define you? To define your identity. You wake up every morning, I would wake up every morning with, the second I would open my eyes, fear and anxiety would grip me to the point where my chest would literally hurt, like sharp pain in my heart, like in my chest, physically. I would have to go, when I was in like home group or social situations, often I would get so anxious because of like, I don't know, half the time I didn't even know why I was anxious and fearful, but I would have to go into the bathroom, shut the door like in a stall and talk myself down. I'd have to work so hard at just being like normal, and it would frustrate me so much because I'm working so hard just to have peace, like just to have fun, and everybody else just gets it. They just they don't have to work at it, they don't have to do anything, it's just, it comes so easy to them. And for me, for 5 years, and even, before that, but there's like a real, just intense time. I had to work super hard, like all my time, all my energy invested in like, how do I just be normal in front of people? And again, I'm going to go into the details of this, and then we're going to talk about like how to get out of it. Okay, so like suicide, like it's a scary place where it feels more logical to take your own life than to keep living. Like it felt more available and more like hope to me, because when you're in this for that extended a period of time and you're like, I can't get out of this. I don't know what to do. Everything that I'm doing isn't working. The harder I try, usually the worse it gets. And I feel like a victim to my own emotions. I feel like a victim to myself. So suicidal thoughts, guys, I never thought I would be free. Like, I started to learn over the years like how to choose to believe that I was going to be free, and started developing a trust and developing like taking those thoughts captive, which we're going to talk about. But I remember the first time I felt panic wash over me. For those of you who've ever felt a panic attack, it's a really crazy experience, because you're living in a horror movie on the inside, and usually like not a whole lot was ever going on the outside. Like my parents like didn't die. I didn't like lose my job. I didn't, there wasn't a whole lot going on the outside, but on the inside, like crumbling. And so I remember the first time I felt a panic attack come on me, like wash over me, as if it was the presence of something. So a lot of this is very spiritual, okay? A lot of this fear and anxiety stuff is very spiritual and directly woven into our thinking. So this is like a whole lot of us and our thought patterns and the way we think, and it's a whole lot of an enemy that loves to jump on thoughts that aren't in line with the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so those are like, they kind of come together as one. So it isn't just warfare. You probably don't need hands laid on you and oil poured over you to get your breakthrough. You probably need to think differently. Okay, so the Lord never, and we'll go into this more, but the Lord really never like whacked me and gave me a breakthrough. And I prayed for that forever, and that's what I was expecting, and that's like, maybe I just don't have enough of the presence. Maybe I'm just like, I don't believe enough. Maybe I don't have enough faith to like get free from this thing. And what he taught me over, guys, years is like, Curtis, I don't want to give you a breakthrough. I want to make you a breakthrough. Like, I want to make you that. I want to embody breakthrough on the inside of you, so that then, like 7-10 years from now, you can stand in front of countless thousands of people and articulate this roadmap, this like exact detailed turn left, turn right, go straight 100 yards out of the labyrinth of anxiety, fear, and control. Because that's exactly what it is. It's like a maze that we get lost in ourselves, and the enemy loves us chasing our tails and getting lost and freaking out, and our attention, he loves that stuff. And so he's like, I'm not giving you a breakthrough, son. I love you, and I'm with you, but I'm going to make you the breakthrough. I'm going to give you the wisdom and the understanding you need to be the steward of your heart, to actually learn the way out of this labyrinth. And I'll be with you the whole way. But that's what I feel like the Lord wants to do for us today. So first time I felt a panic attack, super surreal. I can't even explain it if you haven't experienced it. Laying in bed later at night, and I'm thinking about stuff. I'm kind of anxious. And then all of a sudden, whoosh, this like blanket of heavy terror washes over me. I'm like, oh my gosh. I get up, because I'm like, I need to do something about this. I go into the garage because that's where I can really like pound on the devil, you know, like everyone's sleeping. It's like 11:30 at night, and I can like go in there and pray in tongues really loud, you know, and worship and just do something different to like get rid of this thing. My eyes were completely fixed on the problem. I was totally fixated and all about me and my emotions, and like, God, I need to feel better. So I was like, you're really going after this thing, worshiping, praying, super afraid of what I was feeling. Like, this is utterly terrifying. I don't know what to do with this, and nothing changed. Till I couldn't really anymore, and I was too tired, and then just decided to go to bed, and somehow I fell asleep. And that was in the middle of second year. So a ton of depression, hopelessness, anxiety up to halfway through second year. And there was a lot that went into that. I was in a significant relationship with a girl that I ended, which revealed to me that, oh my gosh, I don't know my identity. I could recite to you scripture for hours, but I actually don't have the experience of who God is as an extravagantly good dad. Like, I don't really believe promises in the Bible. I know them, but they're not in my possession. They're not, I haven't become truth. I know truth. I haven't become it. Okay? So it's the difference between like, give me a breakthrough and becoming the breakthrough. Give me truth, becoming truth. So, so then that kickstarted this whole thing, because I was on medication for anxiety at one point. Guys, at like the end of school of ministry, when you should be a revivalist to the nations. I am on medication, like psych meds for anxiety, that actually didn't help me at all, which is kind of funny. I probably needed like more or something. But the point is, ton of shame involved in that. A lot of shame, a lot of comparison. When you're in an environment, any church environment, maybe it's escalated at Bethel, I don't know, but when you're in an environment full of leaders and full of people that you think have arrived in ministry and in life, let me just say this real quick about leadership, because I think the Lord's on it. The distance that you put yourself between yourself and the leader, like the distance of like worth, like they're a leader, they've arrived, they've got it. He's up here talking in front of us, so like he's really got it. Like he's so much further ahead than me. That distance that you put yourself between you and like your leader is the level of shame you'll live under. So it's not that we don't honor leaders. It's not that we don't like grow from them and learn from them, and maybe they have. But what I've learned, maybe they have developed into a place of more maturity, which is great. But what I've learned is that the only difference between a leader, like someone who's like walking in breakthrough, and like someone who is really in process or going through really hard stuff, is there's no less trials in the leader's life. There's no less process in a leader's life. The only difference is what they understand and what they see. It's the wisdom, and they're walking, and they've learned how to, there's no less trials, there's no less like process. They've just learned how to manage process really well. Okay, so I would look at leaders, and the devil loves you looking at a leader and thinking, wow, they've got it. They're perfect. Which then creates this subconscious expectation in yourself that, oh, I have to be perfect. Oh, I have to get it. Oh, I have to arrive, which is a perpetual cycle of disappointment because you will never get there. You're not actually going to be perfect. You're always going to be in process, and that isn't wrong. That's beautiful. And we look at process, we look at hard emotional moments like 5 years of anxiety, and we think it disqualifies us from our calling. We think, that leader didn't have that. Guys, Chris Valentin and Bill Johnson both experienced, like Chris was 15 years, Bill was like 20 years of anxiety, depression, hopelessness. Bill Johnson, 20 years in the trenches, not giving up, which is, look at the man he is today. Chris Valentin, diarrhea for 15 years before every single time he would preach because he would be so afraid. And we think, like, we look at them today and we don't remember, we don't know where they've been. We didn't see them in those trenches. But we see them now and we think, oh, we got to be perfect like that. And it's so demonic. That comparison thing, it doesn't need to be our reality. The Lord is so much more kind than that. But we need to be careful about what we expect of ourselves. Because for me, I expected myself in the right heart of, God, I want to grow. I want to develop. I want to be emotionally mature. I want to be like Bill Johnson. Like, that's right and good. But the way we go about that, we need to be very careful with. Because if we expect ourselves to be graduated beyond the season and the process that God has for us right now, we will shortchange our identity. We'll disqualify ourselves when the Lord's put nothing on you but qualified. But we'll disqualify us. So, I was really forced into a season of having to learn how to like manage my emotions. If I didn't learn this, I was going to die. And if God didn't come through for me, I'm going to die. Like at different points, it felt like life or death. When it was really intense. The shame that you can face, which has to do with comparison, which I kind of just talked about. And the way, guys, the way fear works is the more you try to get rid of it, the worse it gets. The more you focus on it is the bigger it becomes because it feeds off of our attention. Like, fear is like worship to the enemy. He considers it worship because it's your attention, it's the affection of your heart. So, the more you focus on it and the more we even sometimes try to change the way we feel, is the worse it'll get. And that was my experience. Because I'd be in the secret place pounding on what I thought was the devil when I'm actually just partnering with what he's doing in my life. Because I'm so afraid of what I'm feeling. And I'm in it for me. Have you ever gone into the secret place, gone into prayer, and left worse off than you were before? Yeah, that's me right here. That's what I'm talking about. We subconsciously partner with control, and we make, instead of like this whole thing being about, like, let me rephrase, before it's ever about your emotional breakthrough and you feeling better, that's important that you feel better. But before it's about that, it's about Jesus being king. And him being Lord no matter what your experience is. So whether I feel better or not, that's ultimately not my main goal. It's not even really the issue. The issue is who's Lord? Who is worthy of my worship? And that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Thrown in the fiery furnace, not even thinking about their own lives. The only thing that mattered wasn't them feeling better. It wasn't them like getting their own breakthrough. It was who is worthy of my worship? Who is Lord in this whole thing? And then who shows up in the fire with them? The Lord. And the only thing that burned off of them, the only thing was what bound them. And they walked out of that place not even smelling like fire. With a revelation of Jesus Christ, with the supernatural influence of King Nebuchadnezzar, the most evil, twisted man probably ever, basically getting saved and being like, I worship this God also. So, another one, just a couple last things on my journey through this. Like I never thought I would be free. I thought for so long I'd have voices talking in my head. Like, you're going to be insane. You're going to go insane. Like, you're going to lose it. Like, you're going to break at some point. Like, this stuff, and it sounds, when you're in this for years at a time, like, that sounds so possible. Like, it sounds so logical, and like, yeah, like I'd look at, like, see people like walking down the street even that are, they just like kind of lost it. They're just like dealing with schizophrenia or whatever, and they're just like under this thing. And the voice is saying like, well, what if you never get free? Well, what if you're like this forever? Well, like you have no control over your emotions. Like, what are you doing? The condemnation, the fear, the terror, and what the enemy will do to us, you guys, that we need to be very aware of is he will ask you questions. The enemy asks you questions that never should have been asked and never should be answered. He doesn't, because to even answer, to even respond and engage in that conversation is already to submit to his realm. So there's questions that sound logical in our human fallen wisdom, to use that sharp phrase. There's questions that he'll ask us that sound like, well, what if you get cancer? And he lets it sit. And he watches to see what you'll do with it. Because if you take that on board and be like, oh, well, what if I do? You've just submitted yourself to a kingdom that's inferior to the kingdom of heaven. And with your delegated authority, you've empowered a disempowered devil. You've engaged in a conversation with him that is right back to the garden when he said to Adam and Eve, well, did God really say? That was a question that never should have been asked. It caused them to question the actual goodness of God, the character of God, right? Are you guys with me here? Like, that was a question that never should have been asked. It caused them to be a God unto themselves when they engaged in that conversation. So a big part of this is, and a big part of the journey for me is learning to how to have a different conversation. Does that make sense? It's really good. Really good. I'm excited about this to you guys because I haven't really had a chance to teach this out before. And this is a different message because no one really talks about it. No one really talks about the inner workings of the heart and how to deal with like voices going on in your head, or how to deal with fear that's intense and crippling, and emotional stuff, the inner workings. No one really talks about it, and I really believe the Lord has an upgrade for the body of Christ in this area. So I just feel so much that he wants to do in and through this. So I had a really rough time for a lot of years. And learned a lot through that. And so you guys are going to receive an inheritance today. One of the things that I so believed when I was in the trenches of the warfare, of like just crying out, not knowing what to do, a lot of the time trying way too hard, trying to be way too spiritual, gripping so hard onto my breakthrough that the breakthrough became God, not the Lord. It was like I was worshiping the breakthrough, which is weird that we can do that, but we can totally do that. And it causes us to get lost in that maze. You can worship your breakthrough and forget that he's king. Whether or not you have your breakthrough or not doesn't make him not king. And it's a big deal when you can settle in your heart that, like, I'm not worshiping that. Like, whether or not I ever get through this or not, like, I'm believing for that, and it's his will. But before that's ever even the topic, the reality is that he's king. Read Daniel, I think it's Daniel 6 or 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Study it. and look at their inner workings of their heart when their life was in jeopardy. Look at how they responded. King Nebuchadnezzar's literally like, he's literally like, I'm going to heat this furnace 7 times hotter if you don't worship me, and I'm going to throw you guys in there. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego literally say, King, we don't even need to answer you in this matter. We're not engaging in this conversation. How powerful is that? They're like, we don't even need to give you an answer. We're not part of this conversation. We're part of a bigger dialogue between like us being his kids, him being the father, he's Lord and King, and you're just not. So that's the dialogue we're having, whether we die or not. And we love our own lives unto death. We want our own breakthrough. It says, it's such a backwards thing, and this is what I'm going to try to articulate to you guys today, is that we have prophetic words of destiny and like hope, and we're supposed to be revivalists, and we are, and we have influence and all this stuff, and we think that in order to get there, you need to be perfect on the inside and emotionally all put together, so we try to control our way into that and prune our own heart and father ourselves and worship our own breakthrough instead of this process of submission and surrender, which is the gospel, which is Matthew 10, I believe, that to get into this kingdom, you deny yourself. You deny yourself. If you seek to save your own life, you'll actually lose it. Because to save your own life is control. And control is the direct derivative. It's like totally related to anxiety, totally related to fear. Like control is the beginning. It's the originating point of fear and anxiety. So we seek to save our own life, not knowing that if we give our life for his sake, we'll actually find it. So there's a laying down that needs to take place that's so abstract and never really talked about. And I looked at those verses, and I'm like, that sounds so legalistic. That sounds so I don't want to deny myself. Like, I'm worth something in the kingdom of heaven. I am. Like, Jesus he didn't come to be served, but to serve me. Like, your value, you have incredible intrinsic value and worth before God. And I didn't understand for a lot of years, like, how do you reconcile, like, being a son and then giving up your life? Like, laying down your life, and then actually in the laying down you find it. And then you have Revelation 12, I believe it's 12, somewhere in there, that you overcome by the blood of the Lamb. You guys know this one. The word of your testimony, and then the last part of the verse no one ever flipping talks about, and it makes me angry. Not loving your own life unto death. Okay? It's a fancy way of saying controlling your own life, being the author of your destiny. And we can want our breakthrough so bad that we step into being the author of our own, pruning our own heart, like wanting our own freedom even more than acknowledging that he's Lord. So not loving your own life unto death. This whole process for me was a journey of figuring out, how do I let go? How do I not try so hard? How do I begin to receive? Like, instead of me working and doing it all for myself and figuring it all out for me, like, how do I let him be Lord? How do I be really hard on God and be easy on me? Like, how do I put my trust, value, expectation, instead of it being on me to get my own breakthrough, how do I put it on him? So fear, I'm going to talk about fear. You can write that down in your notes. Fear. I'm going to explain to you guys how it works. Yes, I'm so pumped. I have an hour left, and I've already talked my face off for like half an hour. I never have enough time, I feel like, to actually explain and go into some of the details that I feel like God wants to go. So this is really fun for me. But is this making sense, though? Yeah. Are you guys tracking? I feel like there's unity in the room. Yeah? Okay. So fear, unity. Fear Did you guys know that fear is a compliment to you from the enemy, that you're going in the right direction? Fear is like, I'll give you an example that's slightly on the same track. Every ministry trip I've led I've led a lot, like a trip once a month, basically for the last 3 years, okay? Up until about 2 months ago, 2 days before every trip I would lead, I'd get sick. Like terrible throat sick, nasal sick. I never get sick except 2 days before every single ministry trip I lead. That's interesting, isn't it? Wonder who's doing that. And I had the opportunity to get afraid of me being sick and disappointed and like scared. I'm leading, I'm like dad to 20 people. I'm responsible for their whole lives for a week. Like this totally sucks. I could totally get self-focused. But what I learned how to do is be like, oh, you know what? This is a compliment. It's proving that like the enemy's really afraid. He's actually super scared. And it's a compliment that I'm walking into my destiny. Like fear, you guys, fear can actually work for you if you let it. There's a sailing maneuver called tacking or coming about, where let's say I'm wanting to go to the back of the room, you know, it's 30 miles away, and the wind is barreling directly at me, like direct opposition. And the sailing maneuver called tacking is where you position your sail, hear that, position your sail, and you zigzag back and forth, and you actually, the wind that's directly in opposition to you works in your favor if you position your sail right. And a lot of the times, like what all of this is basically is us learning how to position our sail. Because if it's true, listen to this, if it is true that all authority on heaven and earth has been given to Jesus, and the direct reality of that is that the enemy has no authority. If all authority has been given to Jesus, then by default, the enemy has none, right? If that's true, then that means that my victory in Christ is, oh my gosh, bang, wow. Like, it's over. Like, the finished work of Christ is the finished work of Christ. Like, it really is finished. And therefore, like, stick with me here, like, if it's done and if it's finished and there really isn't a battle, the battle is just with what I partner with and what I believe. It's all in here. The power of perspective, from victory, not for victory. It's what I said earlier about like positioning your sail is about learning how to use your delegated authority as a son or daughter of God. Like, because what you partner with, guys, it says in Proverbs, I believe it's 23, as a man thinks within himself, so he is. You shape your reality with what you partner with. The truth to you, like what you believe, you're so much more powerful than what even I understand, than like what you understand. You are so much more powerful to shape and create your own experience. My spiritual mom, she's like, all the time, you create your own experience with what you believe, with what you partner with. On this missions trip, in this school, in whatever, like you are so powerful that you can actually, it's not that you are God, because he's sovereign and he's like more invested in your destiny than you are, and he's helping you along the way, but the way we position our sail is going to make you or break you. And the sail is our heart. It's our belief system. It's what we partner with. It's what we agree with. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So fear, guys, it's like fear like prophesies. Like just flip it. Whatever you're really, really afraid of, Like, flip it and you'll probably find a key to your destiny. You'll probably figure out, oh, I'm probably called to that. Fear is, I love looking at it in this way because for so many years I tried to get rid of fear in my life because I thought in order to be a leader I couldn't have any fear or anxiety. And the more you try to get rid of fear, the nature of fear is the more you try to get rid of it is the worse it gets, the bigger it gets. And so do you see how trying to love your own life and how to save your own life actually works against you because you lose it? Like the more you try to grab on and control and like this relationship and this circumstance and I want to be this leader and this and this and this, even out of the right desire of your heart, it can really work against you because it's the wrong position of your sail. But fear prophesies, actually. Like if the enemy is going to be talking, I'm going to turn whatever he's saying into prophetic words over my life that are actually good, that are like pushing me in the right direction. Maybe the wind's coming directly against me, but I'm going to let all of that opposition, I'm going to position my sail and I'm going to go diagonal and diagonal and diagonal, okay? Chris Valentin says, the dogs of doom stand at the gate of your destiny. And oh my gosh, is that ever true? Because I believe, you guys, my journey through fear and anxiety, like I'm at a place of freedom in my life at that, in that realm that I never thought I would be in. And I started to realize the most emotionally, this is really good, the most emotionally healthy times, most emotionally free and fruitful times of my entire life were the times when I was trying the least. And we try so hard sometimes because we want it, we want to be free, and which is right, but we need understanding. I'm going to give you 3 verses in Proverbs, are basically our direction, and I'll finish up a few things on fear. Verse number 1 is Proverbs 25:28.
Hey, honey, tell people about Patreon.
Sorry, I had to break really quickly. If you like the Wise Life Blueprint, which, if you're watching this,
What is going on?
sir, please stay off the road. If you like the Wise Life Blueprint, which I'm sure you do if you're watching this, you should subscribe. You should donate $1 a month.
And subscribe.
And subscribe. Because you don't want us to become broke-ass millennials because my husband's doing a podcast full-time.
And it takes a lot of time.
It does take a lot of time.
And it's silly, but we love it.
But yeah. So yeah, do that.
It says, whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. Whoever has no rule over his own spirit, over his heart, his inner workings, is like a city broken down without walls. You're called to be the steward of your heart, to rule and reign, to lead yourself. Before you can ever lead anyone else, you need to lead yourself. Right? Does that make sense? Second verse, Proverbs 4:23, which I mentioned a little earlier. Above all else, guard your heart, for from it flows the wellspring of life. This is one of Bill Johnson's most significant, it's like his life verse, basically. Because what Bill Johnson has decided is that he spent a lot of years in introspection, a lot of years trying really hard to be a supernatural Christian. He spent a lot of years condemning himself about what he wasn't. More focused on what he wasn't than who God is, which is easy. Man, that's an easy dialogue to start with yourself or with the enemy. And what Bill Johnson decided is like, I'm not going to even be the judge of my own motives anymore. Like God can do that. All I'm going to do is I'm going to steward the attitudes and values of my heart. That's you look at Bill and all of his revelation, and literally he's like, I've heard him multiple times be in front of class. He's like, guys, there's only one, on the dashboard of the car of my life, there's only one dial, and it's my heart. And the only thing I do is, the only thing that's on that dashboard is my attitudes and my values. If I manage those things well, like your attitude's directly connected to your beliefs, we're going to talk about beliefs in a sec, truth, believing truth on a higher level, your values. Like if you just do that one thing well, like I'm convinced, you guys, that like 80% of our success in life has to do with like just how managing our internal world. Because your circumstances so don't need to change in order for your emotions to change. You don't need a different circumstance. You need a different perspective. You don't need a different situation. Like that's the difference between a powerless person and a powerful person. A powerless person needs that person to change in order for me to feel better. A powerless person needs a new job, needs a better school, needs more money, needs whatever. You set your freedom or happiness, your joy, on some future event, some future breakthrough, when the reality is that a powerful person changes the direction of their sail. They position their sail to act to whatever, doesn't matter what's coming at me, I'm gonna make it work for me. I'm gonna make it work for me, and that determination inside of you, man, that changes a lot of stuff. And this, what I feel prophetically, even for the room right now, is this is gonna be like, I feel like the Lord's raising up like a room of like Navy SEAL pastors. I feel like this is a room of like underground, like Secret Service pastors that are going to be able to come into people's lives and come from the ground up. Like instead of like overt like Air Force attacks on the hordes of hell, you're going to come up from underneath the ground where like no one is looking and like breakthrough in the secret of people's lives and bring breakthrough and bring understanding in a lot of these areas that we're talking about. Because I feel like this is a room full of people that are deeply committed to like seeing people thrive. Like this is a room that deeply cares and loves people. Like everybody, it's really weird actually. I'm like, wow, this is really unique. So a lot of this, I feel like this isn't just my message, like this needs to become your message. And a lot of you guys you'll relate to a lot of what I'm talking about, but you're gonna get an upgrade in your language and your articulation, because I just spent years in the trenches trying to figure out like, what is even happening to me right now? How do I put language to this really hard thing? How do I position my sail correctly? How do I not partner and make the problem actually worse? So, Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for from it flows the wellspring of life. If you just do that one thing well, you're going to have a river of life, basically, flowing out of you. So that's like, man, that's an important thing. That's everything that we're talking about. Last verse, Proverbs 16:22 says, he who has understanding is a wellspring of life to him who has it. Understanding is a wellspring of life. Notice how it doesn't say your breakthrough is a wellspring of life. It doesn't say that. It says your understanding, you getting it and seeing, like you taking thoughts captive and understanding, because the enemy's power in a Christian's life lies in your ignorance. Stay with me. The enemy's power in a Christian's life, it lies in what we don't understand. Because of our delegated power and authority is so powerful that he just wants to like convince you into partnering against yourself and chasing your own tail and using your own power to defeat yourself. Because he doesn't have that power to do it. He needs your partnership in order to do it. He needs your agreement. So when you understand, like, oh, that's what he's doing. Like it says, don't be ignorant of the schemes of the enemy. I don't remember where that is. I think it's like 1 Timothy or something. Don't be ignorant of the schemes and the plans of the enemy. And understanding. I basically totally stopped praying for breakthrough. Like I totally stopped. I totally stopped like going to, not that You shouldn't. We just need wisdom. Because I started to see, like, I don't need a breakthrough, I just need to understand. Like, I don't need the Lord to whack me. Like, I'm the steward of my heart, and he's given me delegated authority that I can partner with the right thing or the wrong thing, and I need to understand. So I started praying, God, give me understanding. God, give me wisdom to be the steward of my heart. Give me revelation. Because it's not about like Jesus doing something else. He has completed it, though you may not be experiencing the manifestation of that. But what happens in understanding and in wisdom and in revelation is you become the conduit, the awareness of what's already happened, which sucks heaven to earth. Does that make sense? So in understanding, you partner with what has already happened. Not chasing your tail, asking God to do something he's already done. Which is your breakthrough has been paid for. Whether it's your healing or your emotions or your relationships, paid for. He took the problem on himself, became it, died with it, and rose again victorious. Left it in hell, like he left it in the grave. He has the keys of hell and the unseen realm, the keys of death. So any death that you're experiencing in your life, it's kind of an invitation for us to receive revelation. And I don't want, like, I'm focusing more on like the you're powerful side today, and more on the like, you're the steward of your heart. You don't need prayer. You don't need spiritual breakthrough. You don't need like hands laid on you. And I believe in all that stuff, like really, like, and like a lot. But understand too that there's another side of the coin that's like a lot of us are like just like have a discernment gift in the room, and we can feel stuff that's not necessarily us, you know, and still a lot of these principles apply. And sometimes you do need prayer, and it's like that'll totally take care of it. But I feel like we're just too spiritual a lot of the time. We focus way more on the like not taking personal ownership of our thinking and putting it on the devil and putting it on, I'm being attacked. I'm just in a hard season. And we don't understand that if you did understand, you wouldn't be in a hard season anymore. If you changed your perspective, if you changed the position of your sail, you wouldn't be there. So, understanding is a wellspring of life. Holy Spirit. The dogs of doom stand at the gate of your destiny. So, the deal with emotions is that, and with fear, is we need to be very, very aware. Part of the Proverbs 4:23 is like guarding your heart, I believe, is just Bible language for healthy self-awareness. Jason Valentin at Bethel Church said something super profound like 4 or 5 years ago in like a smaller group, like counseling class. He's like, guys, if I could give the whole world one thing, just one thing, it could only be one thing, he said, I'd give them self-awareness. I'd give them self-awareness. Self-awareness, very different than introspection. Introspection is condemnation-oriented. It is all focused on what you're not, how you have failed, how you've fallen short. Self-awareness still has your value intact. It's not questioning your value, and it's wisdom to be the guard and steward of your heart. So self-awareness is this proactive wisdom, understanding from heaven to see. It's like a spirit of repentance in some ways. It's like seeing the way that God sees, thinking the way that God thinks, and being like, oh, like when you're self-aware, you understand what you're partnering with, what you're believing, what the inner workings of your heart. And a lot of us didn't grow up in environments where we learned, even emotionally healthy environments like with our parents, where they didn't talk about their emotions at all. They didn't talk about, or maybe it was just like totally blown up emotions and it was crazy and yelling, or maybe it was just nothing and everything was isolated and hidden. A lot of us didn't grow up in environments where our parents taught us how to understand, like, oh, I'm feeling this because I'm thinking this or believing this, or I had this experience, and like the wisdom of walking through, like knowing what's going on inside of me. Because it's again, I kind of feel like I'm circling around it again and again, but I want to hit it from as many angles as I can. Again, like, if you understand, if you're aware of what's going on in here, the enemy won't be able to steal from you anymore. He won't. Because he doesn't have that power and authority. You have it. So if you're aware, you can be like, oh, I'm putting a wall up on that part of my city. I'm putting a wall there now. Like, I'm not engaging in that conversation with you anymore. I'm not having the conversation of what if I get cancer. What the heck? Like, I'm not having the conversation of what if I fall into another 5 years of anxiety and depression. Because I've come to a place of like, no, I'm guarding my heart with self-awareness. Very different than introspection. Introspection's like navel gazing. It's like you get lost in yourself in that place. Self-awareness is God-focused. Oftentimes, you guys, emotions are so powerful that we need to work really hard at keeping truth, and not letting our emotions define truth to us. Because we have a whole bunch of past experience, and maybe you've never even, at an extreme level, maybe you've never even really experienced the goodness of God. Maybe you've never experienced like Him as the Lord of the breakthrough, or Him as like God's been the one that's provided for me, or the healer, like maybe like God the healer, or the Lord your shepherd. Like He makes you lie down in green pastures and leads you beside quiet waters. He's the restorer of your soul. Maybe you've never experienced that. But we need to be really careful to not let our pain rewrite our theology. So careful. Like Christina Black, one of the things she says is, if we're not anchored in the goodness of God, in believing the goodness of God, in the Word of God, we will adjust our theology to match our pain. So that's another big part of self-awareness, you guys, is you understanding like, oh, I've had all this past experience of never having enough. Or I've had this last 5 years of intense pain, anxiety, and it sure does not feel like God's going to come through for me. It sure feels like I'm going to be in this place forever. But you're not called a feeler, you're called a believer. So truth is like, there needs to be an ontic reference for truth. Like it needs to be like in the Lord, over here, like in God the Father. That like He doesn't move. I lived in Hebrews 6. I don't feel like I have time to like fully go on to it into Hebrews 6, but it's all about like when God makes a promise, He does not lie. And when He made an oath, he gave His word and He gave a covenant, and that is the anchor of my soul. Hope isn't the anchor of your soul, or hope is in His oath and His covenant if you read it in context. Okay? So I need an anchor. I need something for my soul to be anchored into, and it's the fact that, like it says, we have strong consolation in His oath, in His covenant. He's given us His word. It's impossible for Him to lie. So either like God's a liar because like all of these circumstances aren't lining up with His word, or God is actually right and my circumstances and experience are in the process of lining up into truth. two very big, very, very different places. And in that, we need to be very careful that we don't rewrite the gospel when it's already been written. That we don't let our pain or our past experience be truth to us. Because your experience isn't truth, God's word is truth. And there's a stand, guys, the reason why I feel like I can articulate this is because I was forced and chose for years in the trenches, I choose to believe this, though my emotions are screaming at me the opposite. Though it so feels far away, I'm either going to believe who God says he is who he is, or I'm going to be victimized by this thing. And so the enemy tries, here's the deal, this is crazy. This is part of how the wind coming at you will actually work for you, and how fear is a compliment, and how the enemy prophesies is how the enemy comes into your life and he tries to break you, but he runs the risk of making you if you keep your eyes on him. Because everything that you're seeing in me right now is just the result of 5 years of hell, basically. 5 years of fire. And he tried to break me, but he made me. The enemy, the Lord makes all things work together for good. And I don't believe it was ever God's plan for me to be in 5 years of panic attacks and anxiety on medication. I don't believe that was his plan. That was my response, that where I was at, and, not everything that happens is the will of God. There's a whole lot that goes on that's apart from his ideal or his heart. But in that, there's just so much hope. There's so much hope, because he tries to break you. The enemy will try to break you, but if you keep your eyes on him and you just don't give up, if you don't give up, you win. It'll shape you into something that fire will actually burn off what holds you bound. Nehemiah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It'll burn off what binds you. Another thing I want to talk about real quick. Sometimes, so in general, probably 75% of my message today is on, basically, our emotions are a result, for the most part, of how we think. The way you think triggers emotion, and then that happens. Part of the issue is we grew up thinking, a lot of us, 20, 30, however many years, thinking a certain way that is kind of unhelpful. We developed pathways, physiologically, you guys, if you think a thought for a certain amount of time, it will wear a groove in your brain to where the electrons and I'm not a brain scientist, so I'm going to butcher this, but the firing that goes on in your brain, you don't even need to think the thought anymore. It'll just happen. It just happens, and it's a default, and then you're triggered in the emotion. So that's 75% of my message is all right, we're gonna focus on getting better understanding. We're gonna focus on getting better at stewarding what we believe and how we think. But there's another little bit over here, that 25% of sometimes we just experience what I call rogue emotions that don't make necessarily any sense. I don't know, ladies, maybe it's your time of the month. Men, maybe it's your time of the month. I've learned I need to really pick and choose my battles. Not every single emotion that I feel it doesn't really deserve a lot of my attention. So sometimes what we'll experience is and there's a lot of peace that comes to me when I know oh, this is just there's no actual reason why I should be feeling this right now. So I'm just not going to make a big deal of it, and I'm going to move on. Yeah. Just sometimes we just feel stuff. Maybe it's the atmosphere. Maybe it's just, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but when I can recognize like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not giving my attention to it. It goes away. And it's really strange how that works because you love not your own life unto death and you just kind of give up and it's like, oh, it's just water in a duck's back. It doesn't have anything to grab onto. So the power, so I'm going to tell you a story. Does anyone know Dan Mohler? Anyone listen to Dan Mohler? A couple of you. He's one of my heroes. He's Todd White's spiritual dad. So you look at Todd White and like you kind of do the math, and this man, Dan Mohler, just an incredible father in America, travels a lot. He tells a story of he was in a car accident with his kids. And so they're driving down the street, car pulls out in front of him, he's in his truck. I think he had 2 or 3 kids in the car, and he swerves, hits the wheel well, and he rolls his truck down the road. I don't know how fast he was going, but rolls his truck down the road with his kids in the car. Because of this, it was like a underage driver who had no license, like took his parents' car type thing, ran a red light or a stop sign, and bam, Dan's rolling down the highway with his kids in the car. And Dan, like, he is so, like, developed this place of, like, I position my sail, that he busts, like, he had to kick the door open, and he comes out of that car with a smile on his face, worshiping Jesus, that he's okay, and that Jesus is king, whether or not he's okay. You see that? Like, even if you're not okay, like, is Jesus not still king? Yeah, he is. So then, therefore, he's still worthy of your worship. So he kicks the door open, pries the door open, pulls his kids out of the car, and like and they stand together in the street. His kids are fine, and they're worshiping Jesus, and they're happy, and they go over and they pray for the kid who hit him, and the police take him away because, you know, he's an underage driver and didn't have insurance and all this stuff. And they go home, and Dan called his wife, so they're on their way home. They get home. Dan's wife's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're okay. And all this stuff, and just like hugs and kisses and all this. And Dan's little girl, 5-year-old little girl, goes to mommy. He's like, Mommy, you don't understand the accident we were in. Like, you wouldn't even recognize Daddy's truck. It doesn't even look like Daddy's truck. Like, Daddy had to kick the door open to get out of Daddy's truck. And I always thought that, she's saying, I always thought that would be so scary to be in an accident, but I didn't know how to be afraid. She's like, I forgot how to be afraid because I just kept looking at Daddy's face, and I didn't know how to be afraid. The power of what you behold with these eyes. It's the power of the way you steward your heart and how you position your sail. Where is your face? Where is your attention? What are you giving the affection of your heart to? Are you giving it to your problem, or are you giving it to a father that is really not concerned? Because for years, you guys, like, one of the things I really learned in this process is I would feel my emotions are screaming at me. I feel like I'm going to die. I am so afraid. And I'm like, God, like, it's like the disciples in the boat, like in the midst of the storm. They're like, Jesus, don't you care about us? And he's asleep. And I learned, like, okay, I'm going to start learning how to look at the Father and see the expression on his face, to see the disposition of his heart, to see the emotions that he's experiencing. And I'm going to choose to start letting that rewrite how I'm experiencing this in my perspective. And then I would look up at the Father and I would see a face that was so unconcerned when I'm really concerned. And it discipled me. It changed me. I'm not talking about immediate. We want our breakthrough by like next week, or maybe we think we should have had it 3 years ago. But I'm talking about, guys, years of rewriting, like 20, 30 years of thinking. That takes time. And I believe God can like accelerate that, and I'm all for that. And I just believe everyone's going to get an impartation today of like right thinking. But if it's 5 years or 50, I don't care, because it's worth it. It is absolutely worth it. So I started to learn how to look up at the Father, and I would see, and he would show me his face. I'd see it in my spirit. And I'd see it, a totally unconcerned God. He'd tell me all the time, Curtis, I'm so not concerned right now. You're making a huge deal of this, and I love you, and it's okay. I'm like, you're not behind. But I'm so unconcerned. I'm like, oh, then I probably don't have to be concerned either. And so I started to behold that more than I was beholding my problem. Yeah. So the power of what you behold, are you going to behold your emotion, or are you going to behold truth? Because it's an active, this is like part of dealing and functioning in healthy emotional maturity is this takes more courage than probably any other thing you'll ever do in your life. Because this is something that no one else sees. No one else sees the like 10-foot giant that's standing in front of you in your heart, your emotions screaming at you. In whatever it is that you're dealing with fear in, whatever area that you're dealing with anxiety in, like there are these internal giants that God wants to give you, like, or the lion and the bear in the wilderness, and before he gives you the public platform, he wants to give you the secret victory, so that you're equipped. Like Bill, 20 years in the wilderness, wrestling the bear of depression. Like Chris Valentin, 15 years, anxiety, like wrestling that thing, getting that private victory. So that then he could use it as a platform for that corporate breakthrough, which they talk about a whole bunch. But it takes so much courage, you guys. And one of the greatest privileges of my life, as I've developed and just been more and more in a season of freedom and understanding and how to navigate through hard emotions, is like looking at somebody who's really going through it on the inside, really working through it, and getting to honor that individual, like getting to tell them, like, you are operating in an unbelievable amount of courage right now. No one sees it. But what the Lord sees in secret rewards you openly. And again, before you lead others, you need to lead yourself. God wants to make you the breakthrough so that you can become the breakthrough for a people group. So, the courage that's required, I want to put a ton of value on it. Because we put value on the immediate. We put value on the breakthrough when the Lord is like, I love using the analogy, like I'll talk about process for a little, probably the last few minutes here. You guys have done so good. Thank you for listening to me all this time. My gosh. Process. God thinks about process, and he thinks about the journey way differently than we think about it, because we put our value system is usually based on the immediate, like the breakthrough, the now, like even the disciples in Luke 18 came to Jesus, and the parable of the faithful steward come to him, and they're like, so Jesus, when is the kingdom of heaven like going to break out immediately? And like, how is it going to be immediate? Like, tell us about that. Like, we want to reign and rule with you. And Jesus is like, told them a parable to rewrite their thinking about the immediate versus the long-term process. And he's like, so here's the deal. I'm going to give you a little bit now, and then over a course of like 5 years, I'm going to see what you did with that. And then at the end of that, I'm going to give you a crazy promotion and make you ruler over 5 cities, basically. So God's like, a lot of the time, he's like, no, I don't really want to talk about it now. He's like, he thinks differently. We think in terms of like hours, days, maybe weeks, usually. God's like years, decades, and eternity. And so we're caught up in like the now. We're like, God, why not now? Like, and it is his heart for the breakthrough to be now, because he is the God of the breakthrough and he wants you in freedom. But he's also thinking generations ahead of you. When I was in 5 years of anxiety and crippling depression and whatever and panic, he wasn't just thinking he wasn't thinking hourly. He was thinking the generations that were to come that I was going to affect and hand a roadmap of breakthrough to. That's what the Lord was thinking. And so I want to think the way he thinks. And it puts value, because the hardest thing, you guys, about process is trying to get out of process. That is the hardest thing. It will make it miserable. It's at the positioning of the sail, it doesn't work. You're going to probably tip your boat over. Like, you'll just get stuck. And you'll only be focused on what you're not. And I came to a place where I wanted to grow in God so unbelievably bad that I would work myself into a tailspin of condemnation of everything that I'm not, because I wanted to grow so bad. And I learned over the years, like, oh, that's not working. That's so not working for me. So I'm going to choose, I would pray all the time, pretty much every day, God, I would so much rather be grateful for who I am and where I am right now than disappointed in what I'm not. I would so much rather activate my lenses of gratitude, my beholding of gratitude in what you've done in my life thus far than be disappointed in everything that I'm not. Because the deal is that shame and condemnation will never grow you into something significant. It won't. And out of the right desire of our heart, if the enemy can't get you in sin, if he can't get you in like overt sin, he'll change his strategy and start he'll manipulate your desire to grow a few degrees to where it's just exposing everything that you're not. So you get stuck and burdened and bogged down in, wow, I am so disqualified as a leader. Look at that leader. Look at me compared to this person. Or I don't have like the same giftings as that one over there. And when you think and focus on everything that you're not, that's all you're going to become. You're just going to stay there, and it's just this stagnant place. But there's an activation in gratitude. So the hardest thing about process is totally trying to get out of process. And I came to a place where, and even now, like, in terms of breakthrough, I believe like we need to be careful with our timelines. We need to be careful with that, because when your timeline becomes control, or becomes you loving your own life, or you, like, there's this phrase that Steve Backlund uses called destination disease, where you put your joy on, well, when I get here then, or when I get to this level of maturity, or when I have this relationship, or when I get married, or this destination thing, when I arrive to this place, then I'll have joy. Then, when I get this breakthrough, this timeline, then I'll have peace. Then I'll be significant. And subconsciously, out of our right desire to grow, we'll set our value, our human self-worth and value on a future event. Of like, when I get this breakthrough, then I'll be significant, then I'll be worth something. And it's such a backwards, twisted, chase your tail lie, because the reality is you already have it. I started declaring over myself a long time ago, the most important question of my life is answered. I've arrived in value. You're always in process, and you've never arrived in any other place but in your value. But there's one place where you have. It's in your identity. It's in your significance. It's in your worth before the Father. Like, that's not a you issue, that's a him issue that we get to walk right into and hold our hands in and just receive the gift. So something changes in process. Something changes in the intensity of emotion when you're going through it, when you settle into a place of, I don't care if this takes 5 years or 50. Don't care, because I'm not giving up. I know who's king. My emotions aren't king. My breakthrough isn't king. Not interested in worshiping anything else but Jesus, because he's Lord. And in that, you like the vision of, like, I believe, like, I don't care if this takes 5 years or 50. I'm handing this, but this breakthrough is like this, or this giant, is ending with me, and it's not going to my kids. Depression ran in my family for as long as I could see. And I'm like, all right, this thing is going down. I don't care if it takes my whole life. I don't care. Like, it's not necessarily about the immediate to me. Yeah, the immediate would be nice, but you change gears in your perspective. You change gears in the positioning of your sail, and you're like, yeah, come on, fear. Like, bring it. Like, I don't need fear to leave in order for me to thrive in my life. I don't need to be totally emotionally free and bubbly and joyful all the time in order for me to choose joy. No, I choose it in the midst of it. And way easier said than done, but again, you can make the wind work for you. Fear can work for you. Your problem can work for you if you let it. John G. Lake, one of my favorite revivalists. Last thing I'll say, and then we'll do a break, finish up a couple things on process. John G. Lake, like 21 siblings, born and raised in Canada, saw the most radical healing revival that like South Africa has ever seen up till this date. This man, this is a weird story, but this is the first one that comes to mind. This man would, because he had a prayer line of people basically always at his house, like a stream of people proceeding through his house, and he'd lay hands. At one point, he's like, so my like kid is like really, my family really needs me, or he had this, I can't remember if it was a ministry opportunity or a family thing. He's like, I'm going to lay hands on this rock, and everybody who touches the rock is going to get better. So he laid hands on the rock, blessed the rock, and left, and hundreds of people came and touched the rock, and they got healed. Like, that's the level of like the understanding and the anointing that was on this man. It's like the prayer cloth, but it's a rock. So it's biblical, okay? But John G. Lake, he had 9 siblings die of disease when he was a kid. He said his whole childhood was marked with funerals, death, iniquity, and disease. That's like basically his childhood memories. Like 9 siblings. And you look at the fruitfulness of that man's life and the legacy of that man's life, and you think, wow, that man, the enemy tried to break him, but he actually made him. Like all of that opposition, he actually used to thrust himself into the Lord and into a healing anointing. So, the process. Let's end it there. Let's do a break.
And how am I supposed to wear these old clothes when you made me brand new? They didn't fit anymore. Yeah.